basically, there was a lot of changes in the patch. Ice Gauntlet got 10 different nerfs. Fire Staff got 7 different nerfs. Overall, the mage build that I was running got 17 different nerfs. So it felt kind of bad. However, I was pretty down about it. I made a forum post about it. I was pretty upset about it. But they also gave Ice Gauntlet some pseudo buffs. And what they did to buff Ice Gauntlet is the perk Unending Thaw was bugged, and now it's not. So it's a pseudo buff, right? They fixed one of the perks that wasn't working. So Unending Thaw, frost effects remain on enemies 2 seconds after exiting Ice Storm, is actually kind of a huge deal. If you put down Ice Storm and they leave, you can still freeze them with Heavy Freeze for 2 seconds after they leave the Ice Storm, right? Which is like really, 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 really nice. That's one of the buffs that they gave to Ice Gauntlet in this patch, despite the 10 nerfs. The next buff they gave to Ice Gauntlet is they fixed it so that you can't jump out of a root anymore. So if you get rooted, you're actually just stuck in it. You can't jump out like you used to be able to. Now, the root still only lasts about 1 second. So if you root someone, it's literally only a 1 second root that they can't jump for. So they can jump 1 second later, which that 1 second, it seems like half a second. Like, it just goes by so fast. But having said that, you can't jump out of roots anymore. So I would say it's a second buff to Ice Gauntlet. The third buff to Ice Gauntlet is block, sprinting, dodging, slows, and movement will remain on the target for 3 seconds. This was bugged before. So normally, if there was an ice shower, you could get into it, jump out, and then immediately roll, right? Or dodge, or iframe, right? Depending if you're light, medium, or heavy. Now, you can't dodge or move or roll at all. Or not move, but you can't sprint or dodge, and you're also slowed by 50% for 3 seconds after getting out of the ice shower. So before, what would happen is, you know, if someone got stuck, all they would do is just roll out of it and they would be gone, right? So any good player would just roll and they'd be gone. Now, you can't do that. If you press shift, it's just nothing will happen. So that's a third buff to Ice Gauntlet since the patch, which is actually kind of a big deal. And then the fourth buff to Ice Gauntlet, and once again, these aren't buffs. They're bug fixes that also buffed Ice Gauntlet, right? But the fourth one is that if you had an ice shower down and someone rolled into it, it would be immune. It would actually just not work at all. Now, if you roll into an ice shower, it'll still slow you and do damage. So that's another buff, aka a bug that should have never been there but was fixed. And the fifth change they did to Ice Gauntlet, or buff, pseudo buff, is that if you put down Ice Storm, you can swap weapons and the Ice Storm is still there. It doesn't go away anymore. So that's 5 buffs to Ice Gauntlet, meaningful buffs to Ice Gauntlet that kind of help out the weapon. So my overall thoughts is we have 10 nerfs and 5 buffs. Where's the Ice Gauntlet at right now? It feels a little weaker than it was before. It feels okay still. It's not as bad as I thought because those 5 buffs definitely help, but the 10 nerfs really suck. What is the biggest nerf in my opinion? Weirdly enough, the Entome nerf. Like, Entome not doing anything. Like, you Entome and someone can break your Entome in like 2 or 3 auto attacks. It's just like boom, 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 done, broken. Like, that's crazy to me. Like, if it's an ice block, you should be a little tankier. Now, they didn't just nerf that. They nerfed the damage on Entome breaking. So instead of doing like 2,000 or 3,000 crits sometimes, if someone was in an ice shower, it's going to crit for like 700. They cut it in half or more. So the Entome damage is one thing, but the Entome just not really being that good of a defensive anymore is another. So yeah, I think that kind of, you know, kind of sucks. Some people might think, okay, just go Ice Spikes or change up the build. The problem with Ice Spikes is for it to be good, you're going to need like 5 different points because you want spiky reach if you're going Ice Spikes. So you could take out a point of Entombed, you could take out maybe Refreshing Frost, you could take out maybe Gathering Storm, you could take out maybe Critical Rejuvenation, but you're still missing like 2 more points at that point. I don't know, like I don't even know what you would take out. So basically, one way or another, I think this is still the best Ice Gauntlet build overall. And I still don't think Entomb's terrible. Like, you can use it as an immunity. You know, you're blocked, you are immune for a second. It breaks, now you're out. It gives you a second, you know. I just think overall it's weaker than it should be. I think if Amazon is looking at reversing one of the changes, reversing the Entomb change, I think would probably be okay. Now, the biggest nerf besides that is probably just the heavy attacks just being a half a second slower. And you might think, well, why is that such a big deal? The reason it's a big deal is because Ice Shower roots someone for 1 second. The heavy attack is about 1.5 seconds. So to land a shower into a heavy is really hard without someone just moving out of it, waiting a second and moving out of it. It's possible, it's just really hard. I think putting the heavy attack speed back to what it was, and if you want to keep heavy freeze with the 5-second cooldown, is probably okay. Now, of course, heavy freeze being the way it is sucks. I can see why people were upset with how heavy freeze was before. You know, my suggested fixes before were to nerf the damage of Ice Gauntlet and keep heavy freeze the way it was. But if you want to keep the 5-second cooldown, I think to remedy that, making the heavy attack quicker again so you can actually land it before your CC breaks. And then the Ice Shower cooldown at 30 seconds is pretty rough too. So I don't know, one of those couple things, either reducing the heavy back to where it was, reducing the Ice Shower cooldown back to where it was, or making Entomb back to where it was. Maybe one of those three might make Ice Gauntlet feel good again. Right now it's feeling a little on the weaker end, but still probably something I'm going to play. So what changed? Still playing light armor. Light armor got extra bonus healing. I am going to be making sure to pick up Unending Thaw on a piece of gear. So I have Unending Thaw on these legs. Refreshing and Resilient on the rest. But I think Unending Thaw is like almost necessary now with the build. For the record, I think Fireball... So Empowered Fireball got fixed for the Fire Staff. So Empowered Fireball is actually really, really, really good for all types of PvP. And I don't have an Empowered Fireball piece on me at all. But when I pick one up, I definitely think Empowered Fireball will be worth either having on one of the pieces of, probably one of the pieces of gear, right? So yeah, Empowered Fireball will probably help things feel a little better. But overall, it's not feeling that much worse. Now, I've tested a lot since the patch. Duels, you know, Outpost Rush, Wars. If I'm going into a war, I'll probably play this exact setup here, except I would throw on Refreshing Pillar of Fire so that my Pillar of Fire cooldown gets reduced, and then I would respec my Fire Staff into First Strike and Arson's Advantage, and I'd maybe even get Scorched Earth, and I'd give up my movement speed from combat speed and the range on Burnout, right? So we can get a better Pillar of Fire. Now, if I'm going into an Outpost, I'd be kind of just playing my normal build like you've seen in my other build videos, but make sure to have Unending Thaw. Now, there's a couple different builds that I have been enjoying as well. So Fire Staff Rapier is pretty solid into melees. So like Great Axe, Hammer. If you play Fire Staff Rapier or even Ice Gauntlet Rapier, it's pretty good into those builds. Now, the downside is Rapier feels pretty weak in Outpost Rush and pretty weak in Wars. If you're 1vx, the Rapier isn't helping you too much, and if you're against a caster, the Rapier isn't helping you too much. The Rapier is really good against melee, you know, melee trains chasing you because you have a lot of immunes and riposte and fleshes to kind of move around. But just into like a musket player, the Rapier isn't helping you like a ton, but it's something that I find fun. So Fire Staff Rapier, you have the Fire Staff for ranged if you're fighting anyone ranged. Nice. And if you have someone close by, you can land like a riposte on them into getting behind them and landing a heavy, flesh away, and then you pull the Fire Staff back out. It's a fun build. I am actually really thoroughly enjoying the Fire Staff Rapier build. The only downside is it's not super good in Outpost, which I play a lot of Outpost, but out in the world it's kind of nice. Now there's Ice Gauntlet Rapier. Ice Gauntlet Rapier is another one of those builds, and by the way, I'm playing all of these with basically 250 int, 150 con, right? Or a little over 250 int and 150 con. I've found that to just be a really nice split of stats and attributes. So with Ice Gauntlet Rapier, it's really strong in the melee, right? Like, if someone's on you, you can get through them. You can land a riposte. If you do land that riposte, you can swap to the Ice Gauntlet and combo them with Ice Shower, Ice Storm into heavies, which is, like, super strong. And then you can just swap back to your other weapon and kite, and then you can land another riposte. If your Ice Shower's on cooldown, you just get behind them and heavy and flesh through. If you need time, you can Ice Block. Like, this would be, like, one of the best builds against, like, a Great Axe Warhammer. Super, super, super nice. The problem is Ice Gauntlet is not good at range. You get owned at range with the Ice Gauntlet, which is one of the reasons I don't think it really needed that big of a nerf in the first place, because it was just a specialty weapon for melee. It wasn't that good against range. You get owned by muskets. You get owned by fire staff. You get owned by bows. You get owned by any ranged weapon, basically. It's the weakest ranged weapon because it's very difficult to land your attacks, because the projectile speed and the small projectile itself, and when you do, it's hitting for the lowest amount of damage. So that's why it's one of the weakest weapons in PvE. Does low DPS and like single target. It's just hard to land. But what's good about it, you have your abilities, right? So you can combo and burst people down. So anyway, that's the Ice Gauntlet. But the downside of the Rapier Ice Gauntlet build is that you just, yeah, you just don't have anything for ranged. So that's why I like the Fire Staff with the Rapier. Now, the Void Gauntlet. So a lot of people have been asking about the Void Gauntlet. How do you build it? So if you're going to build it the best, I would actually pair it with a Life Staff. Life Staff Void Gauntlet is just, you go focus, you put a focus gem with the Void Gauntlet, you go medium or heavy armor, you play as a healer, but you can pull out the Void Gauntlet and burst people down whenever. The best build that I've found is this, although if you want to swap out Essence Rupture for Tether or Oblivion, if you're playing with a Life Staff, I'd go for it. Now, Essence Rupture is nice if you're playing as not a healer, because it's going to give you some heals. It's going to give you some leech. 20% of the damage done you get healed for with life. So the Void Gauntlet, I like Fire Staff Void Gauntlet a lot. The reason being is Fire Staff has you covered for range, and if someone's close, you can combo them with a Scream into a Blade, and you can just rip their face off. The Void Gauntlet burst is crazy. It's amazing. Now, I've tried so hard to make Void Gauntlet work without Void Blade. I don't think it's possible. The Decay Tree just sucks. Void Gauntlet's really hard to aim, kind of like the Ice Gauntlet. Like the projectile speed, and it's just laggy and weird. Like it's hard to land Void Gauntlet shots. So all in all, Void Gauntlet sucks at range. You pretty much need Void Blade to make it work. And you pretty much need Scream, because its Scream is really good. So basically, you're either going to do Petrifying Scream, Void Blade, and either Oblivion, Tether, or Rupture. And yeah, I like it with the Fire Staff because Void Gauntlet at the end of the day is a melee weapon. So my thoughts on the Void Gauntlet overall is that I don't really like it. It's very good, but I don't really like it because I'm not a melee player. I like playing ranged weapons. I got jebaited into thinking I would love it because it's one of the weapons on int. It's one of these weapons like Fire Staff, Void Gauntlet, Ice Gauntlet. I'm like, oh great, it's an int weapon, but it's more like a melee weapon, really. So the only two true caster weapons in the game are Fire Staff and Ice Gauntlet, and that's why I pretty much plan to stick with Fire Staff and Ice Gauntlet, because it makes me feel like a caster, and I like being a caster at the end of the day. But I do think Void Gauntlet's very strong. I think you can either run it with 250 int, 150 con, or you can actually drop to 100 con and pick up 50 focus. So 250 int, 100 con, and 50 focus, so that you actually get a bit more out of the healing from the weapon. And just as a side note, if you are going to play the Void Gauntlet, I do think it pairs better with a medium set of armor. So something like heavy helm, heavy chest, medium gloves, medium boots, light legs, right? Medium armor with the Void Gauntlet's nice because, I mean, just think about playing like a Great Axe Warhammer with light armor, right? Probably don't want to do that. You probably want to go with medium, so you're a little tankier, so you can sustain yourself in melee range without getting shredded. Medium armor, Fire Staff, Void Gauntlet, pretty decent build. Medium armor, Fire Staff, Rapier actually does work. I like light maybe a little better, but medium armor, Fire Staff, Rapier works because you have burnout and flesh, so you have a lot of mobility even though you don't have the roll. This is actually kind of one of my more Like, I'm more excited about this build than a lot of the builds because medium armor with a fire staff, you do really well in the ranged, right? Medium armor fire staff like does pretty well in the musket, pretty well in the bow, pretty well in the other more squishy mage builds. You do pretty well in the ranged, and you do pretty well in the melee, like we talked about with the rapier. So this is maybe my second favorite build, is fire staff rapier with medium or fire staff rapier with light. The only difference is the light would do a little better in the melee and the medium would do better in the ranged. My favorite build still, I started talking about that before, but just unending thaw with light armor. Just the same exact as I was doing before. Pretty much nothing changed except making sure to get unending thaw and maybe have empowered fireball. If I could find empowered fireball on, like, say these legs and it had empowered fireball and an unending thaw, that'd be like super bis. Or, you know, another piece of gear would be great too. Other than that, still going with ill-gotten gain. We still got the keen refreshing ring. Although, I kind of want a hardy keen ring. I have a hardy refreshing and a keen refreshing. So, kind of making that decision now. And we have the health on the amulet still. But that's pretty much, yeah, that's pretty much where it stands with the new patch. Fire Staff Ice Gauntlet with light armor, still probably what I'm playing. But the Void Gauntlet's very good. There's a couple builds you can make work with it. But it's not me because it's more of a melee style play. I really like the Rapier, but it's not as fun in Outpost Rush and Wars. So, gonna be messing around with all those builds. That's pretty much that.